Hello, I'm Dan Laxer, and welcome to What's Literacy by Literacy Quebec. What's Literacy is a community-based podcast for English-speaking lifelong literacy learners where we explore topics around community building, lifelong curiosity, and the multiple types of literacy. November is Financial Literacy Month, so this episode we're revisiting the issue of financial literacy, or more to the point, which we'll get into, financial health. And I will admit, as I've done in the past, that nothing fills me with more anxiety than money, and either the lack of it or the possibility of losing it. So to help me and you with that, we welcome to What's Literacy Li Zhang, who is the Director of Social Impact and Financial Literacy Leader for CPA Canada. Welcome to What's Literacy.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So first off, tell me about CPA Canada. What do you do?
Well, at the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada, I oversee our social impact portfolio, which has two main components. The first is our National Financial Literacy Program, where we have CPA volunteers go into community and deliver financial literacy education at no cost.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be at a local school, a senior's home, a small business community, even for-profit and nonprofit businesses, because as part of our giving back to the community, it's important that we're, protecting the health of our community where we live and work. The other piece is I do work on our Indigenous initiatives. One of our
Mm-hmm.
biggest programs is mentoring Indigenous youth in high schools to help them to that end goal, which is graduating and moving on to post-secondary education.
Yeah, so in different segments of the community, you do see that there is a need for this kind of education.
100%. And that doesn't matter if you are, in a moment struggling to meet your daily needs or, very comfortable. I think, as you mentioned, finances can be a challenge for many people. And ultimately, it's really asking ourselves some of those tough questions to figure out what we need and where we are and the stories that hold us back in a way.
Hmm. That's really interesting. The stories that hold us back, because it's a podcast about literacy. Where do you think this need comes from? Like, what are communities? And when I say communities, it's like we're talking about. It's across the board. What leads to the need for financial literacy, or the lack of it? How do we get to that place?
I think what I find about money that's really interesting is that it's so nuanced per individual. And to make it a little bit more difficult, it's a topic that we don't feel comfortable talking about, right? And so we
Hmm.
can't really uncover the issues if we don't talk about it, right? We talk about everything else. And looking at mental health as an example, right? You can't really solve an issue that you're not open about, especially the challenges you're facing. And the reality is, you might think you're alone in whatever hardships you're facing. But the reality is, when you look at the statistics, more Canadians than you think are in that same boat. We
Mm.
just talk about it. So you don't know. So you kind of suffer in silence and you don't reach out for help. We know that many Canadians will wait years before they'll seek help. And if they got that help earlier, they probably wouldn't need to file for bankruptcy or really be living such stressful lives for an extended period of time. Because at some point, you need help, right?
Hmm.
That's to help you get out of debt, whether that's, managing your money for your family, your retirement. These are all different aspects and points in your life where you kind of have to address and figure out if this is something I can do myself or if something I need to ask help or do research on. And we just don't do that. And so we kind of just, again, like I said, suffer in silence until it gets to a critical point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know this podcast isn't about me, but you're describing me, and it's little things like you think to yourself, well, how come I don't know how to do this? How come I'm at this point in my life that I don't really understand these things? And it could be something as simple as a family budget or a household budget, something that I hate to admit this on a podcast, I have never put together, and I even at this point in my life wouldn't know how to.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, Dan, you're not alone though. I don't want you to feel like this is a weakness or something that, you know, you should be able to do at your age or at any age and you haven't, it's never too late to be financially well or start that journey, because the truth is money is going to follow your whole life, right?
Hmm.
We need it to put food on the table, to have a roof over our heads. Like these are the basic things. And then you get to a level of security. You mentioned it earlier, feeling secure about your tomorrow, about your retirement, about if you want to leave a legacy for your children or your family members, etc. That's all possible at any age. But a lot of Canadians are kind of in that same boat because of two reasons. One is we're still catching up with the education system. Right now, financial literacy is across the board in all of the ministries of education, which is obviously a provincial jurisdiction. So it's coming into the schools. The other piece is one of the things that we like to do is really talk to parents, because a lot of times, if you're struggling as a parent, you don't necessarily want to pass that down to your children, and so you don't talk about it. And so you almost kind of, you know, continue that cycle where your kids then grow up never talking about money, not understanding that, you know, there's, you know, budgeting, there's ways to save, there's ways to invest, and so they don't have those role models.
Hmm.
And so then, you know, we get older and then we start the cycle again. So at some point someone needs to break the cycle. And for us as the profession, as the chartered professional accountants, we want to be part of that conversation because this is knowledge and expertise that our members have. And it's a great way of giving back because oftentimes we get questions that can be really sophisticated. So it's not that people are not thinking about it, it's that they're not asking the questions out loud. And if
Hmm.
they had the answer, they could actually make incremental changes that would better their situation over time. Like you can't just say, okay, well, if I learn everything there is to know about financial literacy or finances, I'm going to be a bit better off tomorrow. Said no one. And for me, being in the industry for almost 20 years, there's things I still learn every day as I go through my own financial journey. This is not something that any one person will know everything to, because our financial systems are constantly changing and evolving. You look at how investing worked 10 years ago. Today, you have so many platforms that support you in kind of do it yourself, whether that's through AI, whether that's through, you know, again, automation. Like there's just so many tools to help. The problem, though, is that the simpler some things get, the more complicated they get at the same time. So then you have all these jargons and terms and then all these additional decisions. Because right now, if I was in, you know, let's say in my 20s and I had to decide, okay, I'm saving money, fantastic. What do I do with it? Right now,
Hmm.
you have like, you know, your tax-free savings account, your retirement savings account. Now you have a first-time home buyer's account. It's like, oh, good grief. How many different places can I put my money in? And the decisions that you make on where you put that money is really based fundamentally on where you want to go and what's important to you,
Hmm.
right? And so really understanding at the base level, if you've done nothing around financial literacy, is to ask yourself what your values are, what's important to you as a person. Because everybody's money is finite. Even if you're a billionaire, I'm going to tell you it's finite. And you still have to decide where you're going to spend that money. And so if you kind of review your values, what's important to you, then you revisit how you spend your money. Because a lot of times, you know, if you're kind of a middle in that middle income category, I'll say, there's definitely a lot of leakage that happens with
Yeah.
your money. And that could be, okay, well, you know, we didn't have to go into the office. Now we're going back to the office. So there's all these additional costs that we don't think about. Like, you know, I never had to pack a lunch because I could just go down the hallway and there's my kitchen. And so there's these little things. And so to really understand where your money is going, you got to do the work first. Figure out what's important to you. Then you're going to look at the budgeting piece, which is, okay, well, where's my money going? And
Hmm.
does it align with my values? Because ultimately, that's the most important piece on kind of building that path to financial wellness.
You're talking about simple things like, if I'm understanding you correctly, jotting down every day. I spent $1.50 on a coffee, and then how much was my taxi ride? You're just writing down everything. It's as simple as that.
Yes. And then, and I would do it for probably at a minimum a week, If you're ambitious, try to do it for a month, because then you're going to get some of those fixed costs in, right? So you'll
Hmm.
understand, like, if you have rent to pay, maintenance fees, taxes, whatever the case may be, and then really understand the money that that's coming in. Now, some of us will have a standard income every month. Some of us may not, right? And especially if you're, working consultant or in the gig economy, understanding what that income stream looks like, because there are times where money is flush and times where, it's a dry spell, right? It's the money desert. And so really understanding what that looks like for you in a year so that when it's pouring, I gotta save some of that water to help carry me over drought season, right?
Hmm.
Or if that's not the case, then it's a little bit easier to budget. And then understanding where your money's going, and then and asking yourself, is that important where I spent, that $1.50 in my coffee? Did I get that enjoyment out of it? And maybe that's a yes. And you know what? By all means, enjoy your coffee. But if it doesn't, and it's just something that, muscle memory, you're like, well, I leave the house, I
Yeah.
drop by the corner store, pick up some things. Well, that's going to be something you got to ask yourself, right? Like, is that making my life simpler and therefore required? Or is it just because that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years?
It might make more sense to invest in, just a couple of dollars in a thermos and
Exactly.
some Keurig,
And
and off you
yeah, and it's
go.
good. Well, I mean, the Keurig maybe not, but the thermos for sure is going to be
Yeah.
better for the environment. And simple things like that, because I really want to challenge Canadians who are listening to this, and obviously those in Quebec, to really think about where your money is going, right? I mean, in financial literacy, I believe that there's no judgment on how you spend your money, because again, that's very personal.
Hmm.
But asking yourself if everything that you do makes sense in what you want from your life. And if you want, future financial stability, then you need to get into a savings mindset. And the first step to that is, okay, can I save $5 a week, a month, whatever the case may be? And then you get into the habit, and then you'll save enough. And then now your next step is, okay, so now I have a couple $100. What do I do with it? Right? Because obviously you can't just leave it somewhere. Like, money
Yeah.
will devalue. That's just the way it is. And then you're going to learn about, okay, maybe because I'm not sure about my, cash flow, I might need this, right? Like, because I mean, when you look at Canadians that really struggle and they get into payday loans and all of that stuff, it's really the difference of $300.
Hmm.
That's what we're looking at. And so if you have $300 stashed away somewhere, any emergency that can hit you, you're going to be able to cover that and not have to use what we call predatory products. They're very necessary in certain cases, but if you were just able to kind of, long-term or short-term plan a little and say, I'm going to put aside $300 or $400, you're less likely to get trapped in some of those products that really has a very steep decline into debt.
What are you referring to as a predatory product? It's a scary term.
Yeah, so payday loans is
Hmm.
definitely one of them. So how that works is based on your next paycheck, the payday loan group will front you the money today. But your next paycheck they take, $20, which doesn't seem like a lot. But if you don't pay that, then that adds up. And let's say if you never pay it in a year, you could be paying interest rates of like 400%
Hmm.
initial loan,
Yeah.
right? But sometimes we don't have a choice, right? Like, I need to pay the rent. I need to feed my family. Totally get it. Like, we all struggle at certain points in our journeys. But if you were able to save about, and the average is $300 or $400, you can avoid that steep decline because
Yeah.
it's really hard to get out once you've taken a step in.
So let's rewind a bit. Tell me again where that average $300 is coming from.
In terms of like emergency,
Yeah.
yeah, that could be anything. That could be, I need my car to get from point A to point B, and something goes wrong with it. And when you take your car into the shop, it's going to be a couple $100, one way or another. It could be, I had to be off sick for a few weeks, so I'm not getting a paycheck,
Hmm.
right? And COVID would have been a really good example. You're out of, out of service for 2 weeks. If you're not working, you're not getting paid, right? So, or it could be, I've heard horrible stories where, your pet gets sick
Yes.
and vet bills, and you go from, living in a nice, let's say apartment, to being homeless. That's a real story.
Yes.
Because of your vet bills got high, you took out a payday loan, and you didn't plan on how you're going to repay that. And then you go from, being in kind of a stable situation to literally being homeless.
Hmm.
So there's all sorts of examples of that. But when we look at the numbers, your average payday loan is about, $300-400. So if you were able to put that aside, and no one's saying that you got to save that tomorrow, but having that foresight, you can put it, let's say, in a TFSA, you can invest it in something short term. That money you can take out anytime, right? So it's a really flexible account to use, but also something that gives you a peace of mind to say, if something were to happen to me tomorrow, I have something to fall back on for a short period of time, that I don't have to pull some of those debt levers.
Hmm. So I guess what I'm getting at is, how does a person get to a point where they have that, they have some extra cash because they've saved, because they've stopped spending. Like for example, if you know that you spend $1.50 on a coffee or $2 on coffee every day, and you decide, I'm not going to do that anymore, but I'm going to put that toonie here in this container, and you do that over a week, and then over a period of, and eventually, I forget where I read about this, and I asked a friend of mine who is well off, did you ever do that with pocket change? And he said, I bought my boat with pocket change. Like literally, he just put it away every day, and then whatever he amassed, eventually put it into the bank. Um, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of ways you can do that. I feel like in this day and age, we're a lot more digital. I don't know when the last time I had pocket change
Yeah,
was,
fair enough.
right?
Hmm.
But it's as easy as every time you get a paycheck, you commit that the first $5 that leaves your account goes into a different account, like a savings account.
That's
That's
what
it.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, right? And so you don't even see that. So when you budget, you know that that $5 is not included in what you're going to spend, right?
Hmm.
Obviously, you want to make sure that the money that's coming in does cover all your fixed cost, right? Like you
Hmm.
got to have somewhere to live, you got to have money for groceries, etc. But whatever that difference is, you commit that, hey, every time I get paid, I'm going to put that in a different account. And slowly but surely that account grows. And there's a lot of, savings accounts that, if you really want to have access to that money, because, you need that security, it doesn't give you a lot of interest, maybe, 2%, 3% at your local
Right.
bank, which is not great because inflation tends to be higher these days, but it's not zero, is what I'm saying. And then
Hmm.
perhaps when you get to, I'm really comfortable if I have $500 in my savings account, but then when you get above that, perhaps now is the time to think, okay, I'm ready to put it into, let's say, a TFSA account, or another vehicle. Maybe I have dream of home ownership, or maybe I want to start an RESP for my child, which is the Registered Education Savings Plan, which the government matches. So I always love free money. That's my motto.
Hmm.
So, and this is your money. And so if you put money in, the government will give you up to a certain amount. And we know that, kids with RESPs tend to pursue post-secondary education. Like there's definitely a correlation between the two. So there's
Because
different,
having the money is not a concern.
correct.
Yeah.
And also it's something that's there for you. And so there's just more of a drive to pursue that education.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and if you're low income, there's also the Canadian Savings Bond,
Hmm.
where the government will just straight up put $2,000 in that account for you.
Okay.
But you have to open it, but they will put that money in.
Let's get into that. I'm speaking with Li Zhang of CPA Canada. This is What's Literacy. Um, um, I just lost my train of thought. I'll have to edit this part out.
We were talking about the Canadian Savings Bond, education savings.
Yeah. Um, what kind of vehicles are there available to the average Quebec or the average Canadian to know, well, okay, I've got this in this side savings account. Where can I put it now? Where can they go to find out more about that? If you know, aside from going to the bank.
Oh yeah, I mean, online there's a lot of information. Obviously, please take it, figure out where that's coming from, first of
Yeah.
all, because there's a lot of influencers out there that are hawking all sorts of products, and a lot of times they get paid if you purchase or participate in anything. So you really got to have to do your research. But a great place to start, and I say start is Canada.ca. So that's, the federal government's website. And the reason I say this is because if you're saving for the first time, your best bet is to use a savings vehicle that gives you benefits, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's a lot of and there's limits to these, right? So, as if you're opening a tax-free savings account, as an example, if you've never done that, I think the total now is probably $102,000 you can put into that account. And so, what's great about this account is that it's really flexible, right? So you can take that money out anytime, and then that contribution room comes back to you, and then you can recontribute that amount the following year. So that gets added to your total. And anything that you earn in this account is, as the name states, tax free. So when you let's say you earn quite a bit of money, that doesn't impact your income, doesn't impact your taxes paid. So that's one that I would really suggest if you were kind of, starting out in life, especially you're starting to adult, as I say,
Mm-hmm.
in your early 20s, because it's really flexible, and then it helps you get in the habit of saving. Then we're looking at new products, like the first time home buyers, which has a lot of great pieces to it. It's very similar to a tax-free savings account, but also the money you put in, you get a tax credit on. So it's as if a tax-free savings account and your registered retirement savings account got married and then they had a child. So they take both benefits of those programs in. And it's really flexible. So you
Okay.
can put that money in and you can wait many, many years until you're ready to buy a home, as an example. And so, great products to look at, especially when you're starting out. The retirement one is interesting because that's a product I would suggest if you're a little further along in your career, unless you need to activate certain aspects of that. So with the RRSP, you can actually take out money and borrow against that account if you're studying. So if you're planning on going back to school, you can also take a certain amount out to support your first home. But the thing with an RRSP is the money you put in, you get the tax that you paid back on it.
Okay.
So the higher the tax bracket that you're in, the more money you get back. And that every time you file a tax return, your RSP contribution room grows. So there's a maximum every year. But as long as you file your taxes from, let's say, 18, or when you start earning income, that space grows for you. And then that's tax deferred. So when you retire and presumably are in a lower tax bracket, when use that money to fund your retirement, you'll pay less tax on it. Like that's kind of how those vehicles work. So, there's all sorts of, places to put your money. And of course, we talked about the RESP. If you have children or if you want to support a niece, nephew, family, friends, child, you can actually open an RESP account for any child in your life. There's no tax benefit directly to you, but there will be a matching program that the government of Canada puts in. And if you're low income, I said there's that additional piece, the Canada Savings Bond, as well as just the regular matching program. And then when the student takes out that money, anything that grows in it is going to be taxed at their tax level, which is, I'm assuming, low
Mm-hmm.
because they're students. So there's all sorts of these elements that are put into these programs to help Canadians save. for those specific purposes, right? For education, for home ownership, for stability, and for retirement, which is, probably one of the biggest bills that you're going to face.
Okay. And we should repeat again that you were talking about all this information is available or it's a start at canada.ca.
Yeah,
Okay. Because it sounds, at least in the confines of a podcast, it's a lot.
it is.
So aside from that, I mean, can people go to CPA Canada or to somebody like you to glean the information to make it sound a little bit less, well, scary, for lack of a better term?
Well, so CPA Canada does have a podcast called Mastering Money, and we do different episodes on different themes. So, I definitely welcome listeners who want to join us.
Mm-hmm.
It's on wherever you listen to your podcasts. Um, as a community group, if you're listening to this, you can absolutely reach out to us at cpacanada.ca/financial literacy and request a session. We have, well over 40 topics that we bring into communities. Now, we don't do one-on-one, but we do kind of group education. So if you are a community group, a faith-based group, school,
A literacy group?
anybody. Yes, absolutely. We are happy to bring in a program, and we absolutely have one that covers effective tax strategies as an example. And we go over those details. And it's an opportunity where we bring the experts in, and you can ask all sorts of questions. Some people I love, they're like, oh, well, I have an uncle who has this situation. Sure, like let's talk about your uncle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, it's all about removing the fear around money and to know that you're not alone. If you have questions going, oh my God, that's a lot, and alphabet soup of terms, everybody feels that way. I feel
Yeah.
that way. Like sometimes I have to look it up and go, what is it again? First time home buyers? Like, because it's always the acronym, right? And sometimes, the details change. And so you wanna have those conversations, you wanna ask those questions, and not be ashamed by it because we've all been there.
Mm-hmm.
And still many Canadians struggle with it. And a lot of times the situations we find ourselves in isn't even in our mate, or even isn't even because we've put ourselves in those situations. It's because maybe we had a traumatic experience. Maybe we had, different upbringing. Maybe we grew up in a have-not situation where, we're always going to be stressed about money because we lived through a time where there wasn't enough. And so that's
Yes.
trauma and part of your money story that you carry with you. So until you address it and really unpack that, it becomes almost a barrier to your financial wellness and your financial success because you haven't dealt with that trauma. I mean, I'm definitely one of those people where, typical immigrant story. I came when I was very young. My parents they're in professional fields, but here they did menial jobs to make ends meet. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what I call my have not time. And it was really hard. And so, working through that, even as an adult, I mean, sometimes I will not take the subway. I'm in, Toronto, which is like $3.30,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, I can walk the 20 minutes and not take the subway. I still have those thoughts. And sometimes it takes my husband to say, you can totally take the subway. And it just doesn't occur to me
Yeah.
sometimes to even spend that money because I'm so used to saving, that also becomes an issue for me. Like I'm an oversaver. And so what am I giving up because I'm reliving my childhood to say, hey, well, what happens if I can't put food on the table? Or what happens if I can't pay my housing costs? It still comes with me and it's all part of our identities. And so having those conversations, asking yourself, okay, well, what's important? What can I afford? Is just as important. And being honest about it and knowing that there's no shame in it, right? Like your experiences are experiences, your decisions, your choices, they're all yours, but owning that
Mm-hmm.
and charting a path for yourself that ultimately gets you to a better place.
Um, I wanted to ask you this earlier, is there a difference in your mind between financial literacy and financial health? Because I love the idea of financial health.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so the way I see, financial literacy are it's like almost like a triangle. Okay, so at the top you have financial knowledge. So you do have to know something about your current financial situation and where you want to go. Then there's that confidence piece. You have to be confident in your ability to make a decision towards your financial health, right? So
Hmm.
you have to know, okay, well, I know this and I know what that journey looks like. So let's say I know I have to save $5 a week to get to that point so I can maybe take the trip I've always wanted to.
Yes.
Maybe it's to finally upgrade my car because it's gonna clunk out on me and I need that car to do my job. And then there's the action. Okay, so I know it. So here it is. I know I need to save $5. I know I can because I've done the math and I've done the work. So that's the confidence piece. And now I am. Now we get into financial health. So financial literacy is that first piece, but you must complete the triangle to be on your path to financial wellness or financial healthiness,
Hmm.
for lack of a better term.
That's a great place to end it because we're out of time. Li Zhang of CPA Canada, thank you so much for doing this. It's been great to
Thanks for
talk to you.
having me.
In each episode, we'll introduce you to some of our member organizations. This episode, it's the South Shore Literacy Council, and our guest is Executive Director Rachel Wagner. Hi, Rachel. Welcome to What's Literacy?
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Good to have you. So tell me a little more about the South Shore Council. I love that there are different literacy groups for different parts of the province or different parts of the city. What do we need to know about the South Shore Literacy Council?
I think you need to know that we are dynamic and we are
Hmm.
growing. We were born in 1980 and we look really young for 45.
Yeah.
We began in a closet. So we rented a closet from the local school district, and now we reach over 2,600 literacy learners every year.
Hmm.
And so we love that in 45 years we've gone through that expansion process. I think what our current tagline is that we're literacy for all ages. So we subdivide that into five groups. We have early childhood, 0 to 4, and
Hmm.
then we have primary school, 5 to 12, secondary school, adults, and seniors. And so in those subgroups, we have 18 separate literacy programs. And we
Wow.
are thrilled that we're able to offer that variety of programmings to that variety of ages.
That's actually fantastic. So, what kind of programs would you offer?
Thank you so much for asking. So,
Yeah.
in each group, there are at least four separate programs, but I'll highlight one from each group. For early
Yeah.
childhood, we have done what is called the Mother Goose program, and this has been decades in the making. But what we love about this is that we believe that the parent is the best teacher. And if we want literacy to start well, we use the best teachers and the best participants.
Hmm.
We also use the best method. So we teach parents to sing with their kids because nothing makes learning more enjoyable than rhythm and music and sound and someone you love. So that
Amen. I
is
used to
how
do
we
when
teach
my kids were
literacy.
small. We were very musical. We always played instruments together and sang together. So yeah, it's very effective.
So even my children who are now in secondary school still request these songs. So it has staying power in a way that no other program that we have produced has shown us how to make this level of change. And that's what literacy is all about, is making change that lasts.
Yes, absolutely. Is the Mother Goose thing something for the younger aged?
So this is 0 to 4 with
Yeah.
your parents.
Okay.
So it's BYOP, bring your own parent.
I like that. And as we go up the ladder, how do the programs
So,
change?
so in primary schools, so what we've been doing with the primary schools is that we've noticed that there is a lot more hesitancy to read, is that we have just struggled to detach our kids from a screen.
Yeah.
There's certainly benefits from technology, and we want to use those to their fullest intent, but we also want kids to love the written word and to be able to have nuanced learning that is not achieved in a click or a sound
Mhm.
bite. And so we go into the schools and we teach reading workshops. So we call our reading workshops book besties.
Yeah.
And
Good.
so we talk about how nonfiction can be really cool. And all of a sudden, I bring books from the school library and I said, "Did you know this is available?" And it's as if I'm brought out platinum. They just can't wait to get a hold of this book. And it has been on the shelf for decades, I am sure, in that school library. But just the fact that I said, you know, in nonfiction, it has the same elements as a graphic novel. And
Why nonfiction?
why not fiction? So it's not specific, and I don't really, because we're advocates for literacy, we could care less if it's nonfiction or if it is a graphic novel or if it's a chapter book. We just want them to pick up the printed word. And
Mhm.
so we do nonfiction because they're less likely to gravitate towards that, and just for them to be able to expand on something that they love. And also, kids just love facts. They're the best emergent geeks ever. And so we just want to nurture that geekhood. And not only that, is for them to recognize that there's more sections in the library than the computers, and also there's more section than the graphic novels. So,
You're making me remember when my son was in grade two. He's going to be 24 soon, but when he was in grade two, his teacher had a bookshelf in the classroom, and there were Archie comics and other comic books on the shelf. And one of the parents asked, it was a parent-teacher night one night, "You have comic books on the shelf. Are you okay with the kids reading comic books?" And she said, "I don't care as long as they read." Are you of the same mind?
so you know what our thought is that it's just like food.
Hmm.
French fries are food, and asparagus is food. We want them to get calories to get energy, but we want them to get it from the best source.
Okay.
We also recognize that reluctant readers, perhaps the only thing they're picking up is a graphic novel. And
Hmm.
we also recognize that within our school system, especially within the English school system, we have several allophones. And so having a graphic representation of what you're reading is actually beneficial to comprehension.
Like
And
a
so
gateway to,
it is.
yeah.
So we absolutely is anything that is the written word, we are proponents. And
Hmm.
we would never would never tell people no French fries, all asparagus, because it's the French fries which gets you to the asparagus.
Fair enough. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to keep this recording. Right? Rachel says French fries are fine. Um, I'm very curious. You were talking about how, as the kids get older, it's a struggle to get them to read more. Is that a new challenge? Because you've
You
been
know what?
around since the 80s.
Thanks for asking that. I don't think it's a new challenge. I think that it's an evolving challenge.
Hmm.
So we've been looking at studies from the 1980s, 1990s, from 2000, and we see a general decrease in reading. And that
Hmm.
has co-evolved with better technology. And so it's an adaptation, but I do think that I go back to my childhood and I remember reading a lot more and and has a leisure activity. And
Hmm.
that certainly is in gross decline. But our worry is not that kids are not spending time reading book, it's that they're not understanding the nuances of gathering and comparing information. And so literacy, we always think of literacy as the ability to read. But literacy is not singularly the ability to read, it's the ability to compare and contrast and to
Hmm.
make a nuanced and informed decision.
That's really interesting. It's a interesting way of thinking about reading because it's a process, for those of us who grew up reading, that almost happens without us actually knowing it.
Mhm.
It goes on in the head.
I think what has been one of our most curious experiences is when we've gone into the secondary school and we have developed a workshop called disinformation.
Hmm.
And so that they can differentiate what information that they're gleaning online is true or false. And to also know that if you have an emotional reaction to a piece of information that you come through social media, that's actually an indicator that the information is meant to engage you, but not
Hmm.
to inform you.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So we have talked to the students and said, you know what? When you do a research paper, you need to be able to differentiate a site which is intended to engage or to inform.
Hmm.
And you need to also say whoever created this content, what was their intent? Is this clickbait? Or is this information that is meant for me to consider and to step back? And I think that the more the information has you step back and consider, the more likely you are to have information that that creates an ecosystem of knowledge. And so we're anxious that students are what called, they're fun. It's called a filter bubble. I love this word, but it
Hmm.
just means the more you click on disinformation, the more your information is filtered to that specific vantage point. And for them to recognize bias in their research and bias in their social media algorithms. And that's an absolutely new function of literacy. Before we were
Hmm.
talking about phonics, but now we're talking about information literacy. And I love that we've evolved in that way because I think that while phonics are hugely important, I think we're not living in a world of phonics. We're looking at a world of hyperlinks. And to recognize how those hyperlinks are changing what you're consuming.
Yeah. And it's
So
a
get to the
very
asparagus.
yeah, that you're exactly right about that. Is you got to get to the asparagus, and it's such an important skill to learn. And it's great that one of the goals is to impart it to the secondary students. But I see that as a need in people our age.
We actually do this also for seniors, and they've been
Okay.
really surprised because they feel that because they have X amount of years behind them, is that they're less likely to be misinformed. But misinformation is not specific to any age.
Yeah, we're all susceptible to it.
So that actually, thank you so much for that beautiful lead in. That just goes right into our adult programs.
Yes, of course.
And we work specifically with neurodiverse adults. And
Okay.
so that means adults who might have autism. And we
Hmm.
also work with students with Down syndrome. And some of our students have Tourette's. And so in the English system, this is intersectorial. So for sure a language minority, and you also have learning challenges. And
Hmm.
so these are students who don't receive appropriate services for their needs. And not only that is that we look at their families and that their families they're anxious for their child, often their adult child, to have appropriate service and respite. And so when we do these programs is that they're universally adapted for all learning capacities. And the students come together and they're like, whoa, we're safe. And when I think about what we do, I think we create places of safety.
Hmm.
Is of course our first goal is to create a place of learning, but you can't learn if you're not safe. And if the world doesn't have appropriate programming or appropriate spaces for you to be able to progress, then you're static. And so I love that in our programs for a neurodiverse population, that the first concern is safety and that you have a place where you are universally accepted and where you grow at your pace, but we have a lot of water for you. So you're going to grow because we have created that earth
Yeah.
we can nourish you. And so many of these students is to see them from going from even some of our students who were nonverbal to go to having a conversation and writing a poem.
Hmm.
I think that like, that's immeasurable. And I think that only happens when you're in the right soil, and that's safe soil.
That's so interesting. I'm wondering, I don't know, maybe it's too big a concept for a short conversation, but how do you bridge the gap between what we think is a neurological issue, but turns out to really be a question of feeling safe enough?
So I love that is that that all issues come down to, I mean, when we look at when you look at needs, the first need is to be safe.
Yeah.
And so you can't meet any other need, whether it be intellectual or social or even environmental, without first being safe. And so there is no separation.
Mm.
Is that you can't take the foundation from a concept without creating chaos. And so creating safe spaces is about education.
That's something that's gonna stay with me for a little while. Thank you for that.
Thanks for
Um,
asking.
yeah, of course. We talked a little bit about the challenge of getting kids in secondary school, kind of quote unquote back into reading. What other kinds of challenges do you experience? I think
Thanks
that's
so much for asking that question. I think
yeah.
that my answer is an answer that is not uncommon for nonprofits. And not only are we a nonprofit, we are an English language nonprofit in Quebec. We love the diversity of Quebec and we love being a linguistic minority and we love speaking loudly
Mm,
to, to let all of Quebec know that we are here and we are anxious to embrace bilingual or multilingualism.
hmm.
But what our most significant challenge is that in Quebec, federal funding has to go through a secondary approval process.
Right.
And so when we receive federal funding, it's subject to Quebec approval. And you can imagine having going through a secondary approval process that inhibits our planning and that inhibits our funding model. So our challenge, our challenge is predictable funding. But I think that every nonprofit director has expressed that.
Hmm.
But we love that actually almost 40% of our funding is from private funders who've said, we believe in what you're doing. And that is atypical for a nonprofit and especially a government entity under the Ministry of Education. But I think it's a vote of confidence saying, we love what you do, we believe what you do, and we're going to make it happen regardless.
And that private funding doesn't have to go through that provincial middleman.
It does not.
Good to know. Moving forward, what's on the horizon for the South Shore Literacy Council?
So we started last year, we started a seniors program.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, we'll have 10 to 15 seniors come. We'll have a pleasant time together. And and we did. And then that grew from 15 to 20, 20 to 25, 46 active members in our seniors group presently. And we don't have space to hold them. We're actually having to rent another hall because we've outgrown our community center. And I think
Wow.
that's the best problem to have. And I love that what we're bringing in is today we're talking about Mexican cultural traditions, about your ancestors.
Hmm.
And I love that because seniors love to talk about where they're from and will that go forward. And then in 2 weeks, we'll speak with a pharmacist and says, wait a second, are my prescriptions ultimately doing what is necessary for my body?
Yeah.
We've talked with nurses and other health professionals. I love that every week we have something for seniors that's relevant to their experience and that they just can't stop coming and they're so anxious not only to hear what is being said, but to hear it in their language of preference.
Without knowing what programs you offer them, what when they come to you, what are they hoping for?
So they they're hoping that they'll have a safe space.
There you go.
Again, and they're hoping that we will be conscientious of their needs, and not only conscientious of their needs, but that we will provide a space where they can ask questions that they might not have the time to ask in a doctor's office or at a CLSC, but that we can connect them with resources that might not be immediately accessible, and that we can be a hinge point for their progress.
This might go hand in hand with what we were just talking about, but kind of an opposite question. What would you say, maybe not in the past 40 years, but what is your greatest accomplishment?
Um, well, if I say so, I'll no longer be president of the Humble Society. So
Go ahead.
what I'm incredibly proud of, so I started in 2017, and my specialty was working with early childhood.
Hmm.
And I believe that early childhood is hugely important and foundational to all learning. But I also thought that's narrow. And so I moved from early child to all ages. And so I love that 10 years ago, in 2015, we served 50 learners.
Mm,
And so I had mentioned earlier in the podcast that last year we had over 2,600. So
wow.
I'm thrilled that on almost the same amount of funding that we have grown exponentially. We would never be adverse to more funding.
Yeah, of course.
But I feel like with a committed team and with a genuine desire to serve the population as whole, you can make extraordinary things happen.
Well, people seem to figure this out on their own, but for anyone who wants to get in touch with the South Shore Literacy Council, what's the best way?
So you can contact us through our website, southshoreliteracy.org, by
Hmm.
phone 450-671-4375 or info at southshoreliteracy.org. literacy.org.
Perfect. Rachel Wagner from the South Shore Literacy Council, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having taken the time and the
It's a
interest.